All right, I'd like to welcome everybody to the Village of Cottage Grove Village Board of Trustees meeting on Monday, February 3rd. It's 6:31 on my watch. We are holding the meeting in the Village Hall as well as on the Zoom. The Zoom link is at the top of the agenda. With that, we have a quorum, and the agenda was properly posted, and we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Next, then we have public appearances. This is the public's opportunity to speak. If you are from the public, we just ask that you share your name, your address, your municipality, and hold your comments to no more than 3 minutes. I do have a wish to speak form here. So, Mark, do you want to come up? You want to press the button before you get started and share your name.
Mark Spahos, 242 Chateau Drive, Cottage Grove. Lived here for 18 years, and I'm running for a board seat as a trustee in this next election. I wanted to start, I sent you an email, Sarah. I wanted to thank you for your service. I've talked to a lot of town residents, very few that watched the broadcast, but the ones that did saw your passion and your fiscal responsibility to the community. They mentioned your shaking hands and how you were kind of getting emotional about it. And they said that's what they voted for when they voted for you. So they were very proud of what you did. Tonight, I'm here tonight to talk about one specific issue. And I've never run for public office before, so I'm reviewing everything from budgets to communications, past meetings, memos. And I ran across something that really confused me. On October 22nd, the village board was going over the budget. And per the memo, the committee voted unanimously to recommend the proposed budget with the following changes. Change 3, remove strategic planning $40,000 capital fund 410 from the budget. That wouldn't have hit me as anything but common business until I reviewed the minutes on November 12th, where the Village of Cottage Grove, and it came in a memo from Inga Cushman, Assistant Administrator and Human Resource Manager, directly about the strategic plan of the Village of Cottage Grove. It was an RFP, request for a proposal that's unfunded because it wasn't in the budget. The Village of Cottage Grove, population 9,345, is currently seeking proposals for qualified consultants to provide strategic planning services to the village board to complete the village's first ever strategic plan. The RFP had several requirements, and we have 2 people that are presenting RFPs tonight. I want you to know that when I worked for FedEx in my back life for 13 years, I was in charge of presenting and putting together RFPs for the big FedEx opportunities we had. And I didn't take it lightly. Usually took about 3 days to put them together with a team of people. And so when I saw that, and I saw that we have people coming to present tonight for the board for strategic planning for something, an RFP that has no money behind it, I then came to more memos, and I ran across a memo 6 days ago, January 28th of 2025. From Inga Cushman again, presentation from consultants regarding proposals for strategic planning services. During the budget process, the village chose not to fund strategic planning in the 2025 budget. However, staff were directed to seek proposals for the board to consider in 2025, and if approved, the planning process would start after the spring election. So they requested the RFPs, and the people are here tonight. So this is what I wrote, because this doesn't make sense to me. I've never heard of an RFP being put out to businesses for selection for something that's unfunded. So the village board unanimously vetoed to remove a $40,000 allocation for strategic planning from the 2025 budget under the Capital Fund 410 on October 22nd. However, on November 12, 2024, 21 days later, the Village Assistant Administrator and Human Resource Manager Inga Cushman requested an RFP seeking consultant services for strategic planning. On January 28th, Ms. Cushman issued another memo to the Village Board explaining that despite the board's decision to move the strategic planning item from the budget, remove it completely, the staff has been directed to proceed with an RFP. As a result, 2 firms are here this evening scheduled to present their proposals to the board, followed by a closed session where, according to the notes tonight, they're going to discuss the contract terms with regarding the firms. The situation raises serious questions because I'm running on save the taxpayers and fiscal responsibility, and I believe in professional governments. Who directed the staff to issue an RFP for an item that the board explicitly removed from the budget unanimously? How is this fiscal responsibility or transparent? How is it fiscally responsible or transparent to proceed with seeking bids for an item that lacks budget approval? And how, in a closed meeting tonight, after hearing the two presentations, how is the village board going to discuss a contract that has no budgeted money to support it? These decisions can undermine trust in a responsible financial management and raise concerns about accountability to taxpayers. Transparent and fiscally sound decision-making is essential to maintaining public confidence and ensures resources are allocated wisely. In summary, to have the board review the 2025 budget and specifically remove $40,000 expense directly related to strategic planning consulting, and then 21 days later put out an RFP with the intent of issuing a contract to a consulting firm in the first quarter of 2025 for approximately $30,000. I come up with that number because that's the average of the two proposals this evening. It shows a lack of leadership, shows a lack of fiscal responsibility, a lack of commitment to the taxpayers of our village, and a lack of respect for the consulting companies that use their valuable time and resources preparing for a presentation for an unfunded RFP. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Anyone else, either on Zoom or in the room, wish to speak? All right, then we'll move on to discuss and consider our meeting minutes from a special board meeting held on January 13th. Any questions, comments in regards to the meeting minutes as presented?
I'll move approval of the meeting minutes as presented.
We have a motion and second then. Any other discussion? Having heard none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Anybody abstain? Motion carries. Next up, then, we have a presentation to the board. Our Monona Grove School District Superintendent, Tanya, is here to discuss enrollment planning. This was the result of discussions with staff and their normal touch bases, and apparently, obviously, the questions about this that came up. So, Tanya, thank you for coming tonight.
Thank you for having me. Kristen Sobozinski, our assistant superintendent, is joining us via Zoom. So she's on here also as she works directly with me to make these forecasts. So what you have in front of you is an updated forecast of our, looking back at what our enrollment looked like in Cottage Grove back to 2019 with our projections going forward. So one of the things that I think has been an ongoing conversation in my whole 7 months here is around enrollment and the buildings being full and some of those kind of things. So as we've been talking with the village about proposed planning and potential increase in single-family homes, we've been having conversations about what that would do to enrollment. And as we've talked about, we've got plenty of room in our schools and really wanted to have the opportunity to share that with the whole village board. And then continue to have ongoing yearly conversations where we would talk about what do our next 5-year projections look like. Because as you roll 1 year off, you put the other one on so that we can continue to stay in connection about that. This does not take into account any new large-scale single-family residential homes that would be built. This is what we currently know as of now. So I would also take that into consideration. The other thing is this does also include our open enrollment seats that attend school in the Cottage Grove schools. So in 2017, Vandewall did a study to look at long-term projections. You can see what's in the light blue is what on the bottom, what their projections were moving forward. So in that enrollment history. As you can see over time, the projections that they had made slowly start to creep up. Every year you see less and less students that are enrolled here relative to projections. I think we've talked with the village staff about lots of different reasons why that was. You had the pandemic right in there, interest rates, lots of different things that have happened. But it is a growing community, but it's not yielding school-age children. So wanted to present that. The other thing that has come up from the district perspective is in August, September, it was voted on to go to neighborhood schools. And when the committee looked at going to neighborhood schools, the conversation really was, how do we decrease the transitions that kids have during their elementary experiences? So right now, it's like 2 years, train, 2 years, trade, and keep going up. And thinking about how do we move to neighborhood schools and reduce those transitions and have families with young children be in one spot longer together to minimize that for families. So the question was, do we have enough space? So that's what was looked at. Question was never asked, do we have too much space? And so I think as we're looking at from a fiscal perspective and moving forward, really reviewing what building capacities are and having a question about, are we good with where they're at? So building capacities are usually set by the board, and the Board of Education set these in 2017, and so you can see what those building capacities are. The important thing to know about those is when you set a building capacity, 100% really isn't 100%, it's 90, because you always want to leave a little bit of wiggle room so that you don't run up to 100% and then all of a sudden realize like you're out of room, because you need time to plan. For some reason, and we're digging into this, Glacial Drumlin, their 100% is actually 80%. And so that's another thing to be looking at. So Taylor Prairie currently running at 70%, Cottage Grove School 70%, Granite Ridge 78%, and Glacial Drumlin 77%. So right now we have space here for 1,854 students, or we can have up to 1,854 students in that area is what we have. And so we're running on average of 72% building capacity, which then, obviously begins to bring up a question of, are we running at maximum capacity? Because all of the things that, no matter how many kids are in a building, you have doubles of, administration, office staff, student services staff, just a lot of the different things. And so pressing pause on the reconfiguration for the board to be able to look a little deeper at this. So one of the things that will happen is asking the people to come back in and redo the building capacities. There has been some changes in the formula for building capacity since it was last done in 2017. So that will be work that will be happening this spring, and then bringing that back to the Finance and Operation Committee to look at, because from a teaching and learning perspective, having less transitions for kids is the right thing to do. But making sure that we have the right configuration where we're not going to, in a few years, ask families and teachers to change again so that we get it right the first time is really important. So that's where we'll be looking at working. So open it up for any questions that you have about the project or any of the numbers.
Will Vanderwall be doing the projections again this year?
No, EUA will do it. They were involved in the 2016, 2017 with them. And so they'll do them for us because they will come in and do them for slim to no cost. So.
Is the plan to make a decision on neighborhood schools this summer then?
To do the work this summer and then go back to the board for the board to make a decision on what direction they want to go late summer, early fall. That would be in effect for 26, 27.
What's the timeline on the current survey, and when do you think you'll have results and recommendations coming out of that?
For them looking at the building size and bringing that forward
The open survey that was sent out a few weeks back?
on the budget.
Yes.
Yeah, it closed the 31st, so we're looking at the results right now.
So do you expect on publishing anything publicly as far as recommendations, et cetera? Any
Absolutely.
idea on timing, next couple weeks?
Our next board meeting is the 12th. I think it will go to Finance and Operation first, and then to the board meeting. Yeah.
Thanks for coming and presenting. I had the opportunity to have, this was quite a few years ago that your predecessor visited the board and talked somewhat about some of these same things before Granite Ridge was built. So I appreciate you coming tonight. I know that a lot of questions come up when we have development on the impact on schools. So I appreciate that, and hopefully we can, of course, coordinate with our staff on the results. I guess one thing that I've heard, and since you're here, the buildings, if they're not operating at capacity, is there a consideration that the district would look to sell one of the buildings.
None of that has been talked about or decided upon. Can't buy something that's not for sale. Nothing's for sale right now. I think that would be a real deep dive into what do the future projections. Anything past 5 years is really not very solid, and what do you have happening in the next 5 years is probably your best bet. I think that the district's board is going to have to make decisions about what they feel is good capacity, and then if you have a building that's not at capacity, what could else be happening there? I think there's a lot of different decisions, but hopefully that would be early fall.
So when I look at this, so it shows total capacity of 2,559 students, right? So the peak is next year at 1854. So that shows an open capacity of 705 seats. So when you're saying nothing's for sale, but it's fair to say there's a consideration when we say there's difficult decisions that lie ahead, that could be in the consideration set. Is that true?
Well, I think anytime you sell an asset, when you as part of something, that would have to be taken into consideration because that's all part of the portfolio. So whether it's being operated or not, it's still in the portfolio. And, if there's a decision that, you run it at 75%, and then run something else or lease the other side out for something, I think there's lots of opportunities to be talked about.
Yeah, I appreciate the talk about the 5 years. We come up with that also too, to look at our population, the window of directions you can go with, looking more than 5 years is challenging.
Any other questions for Tanya? Again, thanks for coming tonight and
Absolutely.
sharing.
Thank you.
All right. Next, then we move to unfinished business. First up is to discuss and consider a lease extension for property on 612 Main Street, North Main Street.
Yeah.
Rick?
So I know we got other presentations tonight, so if you wanted to, we could push these back. But, so this is for the property that the village bought last year. The tenants have requested to extend their lease by another year. So this is a lease extension to do that, and it increases the rent that would be charged, because right now it's very minimal. So this would actually be more of a, I wouldn't say market rate, but it's a higher rent amount, so you're actually getting some income from the building. So we do have the option of a closed session later on tonight if you'd like to discuss the lease terms. Otherwise, you could take action right now if the lease is acceptable in its current form.
Any questions, comments from board members? Prefer to go in a closed session and talk about it? Yes. And then come out? Yes. Okay.
Right.
All right. And then out of that, then we'll make a decision on that. Probably the same thing for the next one too, for Supreme? Making a yeah, and no, it's okay. All right, then we can move right on to new business. In this case, we have a presentation from consultants regarding the proposal for strategic planning services. Inga, you had a memo in the packet kind of introducing this.
Yep, just a brief memo. We did send out an RFP for strategic plan consultants, and we had 6 respondents. 2 of them were invited here tonight based on the staff reviews of the proposals. That's Allison Burnett Consulting, she'll be up first, and then CP2 Consulting is also presenting tonight as well.
All right.
If you want to. Should I angle that?
And you just have to press that little person that looks like it's talking for the mic to be hot.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Okay, we're hot. Let me just share my slides. While I do that, I just want to say briefly that Corey is up here, and you guys have, if I do say so myself, 2 phenomenal consultants in front of you, and no matter which direction the village chooses to take, I am confident you'll have a great product in the end. So let's talk about me, shall we? So I am a solopreneur. So in order to really introduce you to my firm, I want to make sure you understand a little bit about my background and my values, because my values play a huge role in the business that I run. I moved to Wisconsin from the New York City area 14 years ago. I know, as far as they say up in Green Bay, I won't be a local until I'm in the ground, but I've tried really hard. So I've gotten really involved in the community in this way by working in local government. I've had either through internships or jobs. I've worked in city, federal, and county government for over 10 years. Along the way, I completed my master in public administration, and I received, when I was a UW Extension local government educator, certification in what's called the Bryson method of strategic planning. I won't bore you to death with the details, but John Bryson is a really esteemed former professor at University of Minnesota, and he kind of wrote the book on strategic planning for nonprofits and local governments specifically. I made the choice to jump into entrepreneurship in 2021. I left a department head role in city government at that time. To be very frank, I reached a place of burnout during the pandemic, and I realized it was best for me at that time to step back and make a difference from the outside. So I've had my business for 3 years. I work in a couple different areas, which I'll fill you in on, but most recently I received certification as both an individual and team leadership coach, which is really fulfilling for me. One of my core values I lead with is authenticity, and by helping others understand more about themselves, be more self-aware as leaders and team members, I feel I'm able to honor another one of my values, which is making a difference. So why the heck would I leave city government and become an entrepreneur? It seems like a terrible idea, right? I know I miss my state of Wisconsin retirement system pension, and I miss my health insurance, and I miss having coworkers. I'm honestly way too extroverted to be self-employed, so I really miss a lot of the elements of being a part of city government. But the other side of the coin has made it such a great trade-off. Some of the values I really lead with are balance. I've been pursuing the elusive work-life balance in earnest over the last 3 years. And when I set out to start my business, I said I no longer want to center my life around work. I want to be a family member and a friend first, work third, which is hard. It's very hard to make that a successful part of your mission, but I'm really proud of the balance that I strike. I'm able to really live in alignment with my values and make a difference, not only in the communities I serve, but also by being a more present daughter, neighbor, wife, etc. So my business, the primary part of my business, which I'm obviously here with you about this evening, is organizational development consulting. I work primarily with cities and counties in the Midwest, but I do work nationally. I also do a limited amount of community facilitation around city branding. You guys have a phenomenal brand, by the way. I was trying to dig to the bottom to figure out who did yours, because it's a really good one. I also do some public speaking, mainly on community development and placemaking, and I am a recurring contributor for a national think tank. So if you're ever looking for some bedtime reading, I write extensively on AI in the federal government and in courts. So seriously, if you ever need something to put you to sleep. Some other things to tell you about with my business. I'm proud that I have been a certified woman-owned business enterprise for the last 2 years. If you're familiar with that process, it's quite rigorous and honestly somewhat invasive. So I'm very proud to have received that status. I also, like I mentioned, I'm a certified leadership coach. I primarily work in individual coaching, where I'm working with folks, many of whom are actually folks retiring out of local government, but they're maybe not ready to hang it up yet. So they're trying to figure out what their second encore career looks like, or folks who are looking to transition careers and want to better articulate their skills and strengths through their resume and approach the job search, which can be really grueling and disheartening. Approach it with a little bit more confidence. Lastly, something else I'm really proud of, not every community has the budget or the political will to support strategic planning. And I realized this very quickly, that a lot of times communities that need strategic planning the most can't access it. So 3 years ago, I trademarked a product that I describe as a skinny strategic plan. It's called Civic Health Check, and it is a very accessible strategic plan, ultra light. It gives you about 1.5 to 2 years of strategic goals and a comprehensive SWOT analysis, and it's priced starting at $2,500. So it's extremely accessible for small markets or for communities that simply don't have the political support to engage in strategic planning. I like to say that no community or organization is too small to have strategic planning. We just have to get creative with the budget. Lastly, I mentioned my values. So I really loved the fact that Cottage Grove has their values so clearly stated on their website and in their materials. And we have a little bit of overlap, especially when it comes to challenging the status quo. So my core values that I lead with in my business, firstly, listening loudly. When I worked in local government, I'll let you know a little secret, I hated consultants. And when I went to the dark side, I said, I have to get this right, because I've seen too many consultants that managed to really irritate myself and my peers in local government leadership roles. The reason I didn't resonate well with consultants was I felt that they did too much talking and not enough listening. I didn't want someone to come in and copy and paste the same strategy or the same idea without giving consideration to our local context about why we approached things the way we had or what hadn't worked before. So when I lean into this as a facilitator, I focus primarily on using my 2 ears more than my 1 mouth, which means that I build trust through relationships, and I make it a priority to not preach, project, or proselytize to your community, but to take time to actively listen to your leaders. Next is championing the vision. I also love that you have vision as a part of your mission, vision, values. Part of a strategic planning process is figuring out that end state of where you want to be, and then figuring out those baby steps in between. Take that big picture vision, which may feel out of reach, and find the small implementable steps to get there. My last 2 values are challenging the status quo, knowing that government isn't always known for being innovative. It definitely errs on the more conservative side when it comes to decision making. But I'm really passionate about ensuring that governments remain innovative in 2 spaces. One, keeping up with customer expectations, because we do deliver a service. Even if we think government isn't customer service, everyone that lives or has a business in your community is making a choice to do that. And then lastly, making sure that we don't reject innovations that might offer us a chance to be more competitive in a really kind of terrible time to hire, a very difficult talent landscape to attract and retain individuals to work in local government. So let's talk a little bit about this Cottage Grove proposal. I've presented a strategic planning proposal which includes 4 phases, and I'll walk you through each of those 4. Phase 1 is really where listening loudly shines bright. It's our information intake phase. In this phase, we commit a lot of effort to ensuring that we hear all the different perspectives in your community. We start with a confidential survey for employees and all elected officials to kind of take a temperature on what the challenges and the strengths are in the organization. From there, something that I do that, quite frankly, is a huge loss leader, but it is invaluable, is I set aside up to 45 minutes with every single elected official and department head to have a confidential one-on-one interview with me. We can talk about whatever you want. I do have a structured script of questions that we go through, but these confidential interviews one-on-one with leaders offer completely invaluable insights into what's going well and where there are pain points within the organization. I also recommend we layer in focus groups. Focus groups with intentionally targeted and invited audience members, oftentimes it's former staff members, community leaders from various groups, or folks who volunteer on committees or advisory boards, offer folks who have enough insight into local government. I'm not anti-community workshops or random focus groups, but they tend to attract the ends of the spectrum, not the middle of the bell curve. You tend to get your local gov superfans who love what you do and want you to spend more doing it, and the folks who hate everything you do and are hell-bent on defunding you. It's not necessarily the silent middle. We also have the option within this proposal to structure a community-wide survey if you feel that you need to cast a wider net and garner community input. After we bring all that information together, we really launch into the Bryson method, which is a 4-phased approach of strategic planning, which kicks off with a SWOT analysis before layering in your vision, mission, and values. Now, I could not make this pyramid look more boring if I tried, so we've got a few colorful images instead. I was a theater kid growing up, so I do my best to make things fun. I really believe that when people are engaged and are interacting and having fun with what they're doing, they have more buy-in. I also realized that you are all incredibly busy and that you didn't sign up to run for village board because you didn't have enough to do. So I want to maximize time we have together. Across the workshops we have for both staff and for elected officials, I really try to make them fun. While they are serving a purpose, you can expect interactive activities, you can expect games and prizes. I'm known for always bringing Uncle Mike's Kringle with me everywhere I go. So I try to make these workshops something you don't want to miss, rather than something that seems like yet another date on your already busy calendar. After we have all the pieces from the workshops and from the listening, I really think one of my superpowers is taking chaos and finding structure from it. I will take all of those pieces and determine what those objectives are to reach that vision you stated within that 3 to 5 year period. And from there, we break it down into those manageable, implementable steps, with each goal having an objective, initiatives, and data measures underneath it. We also go through a lot of redlining. Typically, each strategic planning committee that I work with is composed of a representative cross-section of leadership who will really go through the plan line by line to make sure that the document that actually lands before elected officials not only is something that will resonate with elected officials, but it also has the political feasibility, let's say, to get adopted. Sometimes that takes longer in some communities than in others. I have one community I'm working with in Dane County right now where the political revision process has taken longer than I ever would have imagined. Lorraine knows what I'm talking about. Lastly, for phase 4, I really strongly believe that we have to give you a strategy to implement this plan. I have worked with a lot of local governments, and I have never met a single one where department heads have told me, you know what, I have an extra 5 to 10 hours a week to work on strategic goals. They don't. What I hear instead is, this was really fun, Allison. Now, when the heck do you expect me to actually get this done? Because I'm currently answering emails on nights and weekends to keep up with my workflow. So we train your department heads in a methodology called EOS, which stands for Entrepreneurial Operating System. It's a private sector implementation strategy by a gentleman named John Wickman. I'm not a trained facilitator, nor do I get any kickbacks from this company, but I've read a lot of efficiency, lean strategy type books, and I think this one is one of the most easy and seamless to integrate. So we provide the books and baseline training for your staff members on how to structure your time and how you review issues, and how to ensure that every team member within your organization not only understands and can state your vision, but understands how their work directly ties back into it, and provide a framework for how that time management works so that this isn't just an overwhelming task that gets shoved to the bottom of the to-do list. So we provide an in-person implementation training as well as a recorded version of that training. We understand that it's theoretically impossible for you to adopt a plan and then have absolutely no new leadership hires. So we also offer at no additional cost ongoing onboarding if you have new leadership join your organization between the adoption of a plan and the drafting of a new one. What I feel really sets my firm apart is the fact that I do individual leadership coaching. I know how important it is that every single department head has buy-in into this plan. And I also know that while we move as a whole in governments are organizations which are composed of individuals. In order to close that circle that I have with each of my department heads I work with in a community, we start with those one-on-one confidential interviews at the beginning of the process, and we wrap at the close with an intensive individual leadership coaching, where they will complete a series of assessments and they will have a customized UMAP created for them. UMAP is a proprietary leadership coaching strategy. It's basically like if the DISC profile and Clifton Strengths had a baby. So it brings together your skills, strengths, values, and personality, not to be interventionary or to tell you what's wrong with you, but instead to help you celebrate and maximize your strengths of what you do best. So it's helping the individual leaders within the organization understand how to maximize their role as a leader. And we tie into that implementation training session a team building workshop where they will better understand how their strengths align with their peers. So it's a way to really ensure that your team is maximized as you move forward. I want to note too at this time, while I am the primary face of the company, I also work with one other consultant who will be on site with me. Her name is Nicole Clapadlo. She's based in the Austin, Texas metro. She is also a former local government professional. She's worked in planning and community development in cities including Detroit, Austin, and Boulder. And her real strength is in community engagement. She has done a lot of work that's attracted attention nationally in building community partnerships between arts organizations and city governments to create cultural districts. So she will be joining me on site. The other consultants I work with as subcontractors, they are sort of behind the scenes aiding with graphic design, research, and plan development. Now, I don't like to talk about myself. It makes me outrageously uncomfortable, but I do want to share some feedback I've received from staff that have really enjoyed working with me. And then more importantly to your role, what client feedback I've received from elected officials. Oftentimes what elected officials value the most from working with my company is the fact that we bring forward these 360-degree perspectives. And we also facilitate sometimes uncomfortable conversations, which aligns with one of Cottage Grove's values, which is leaning into those uncomfortable conversations. I think the way you phrase it is have tough conversations, make tough decisions. I always do it kindly, but I try to be an outside force for good that can sometimes be the outside voice that mediates and facilitates conversations that need to happen around pain points. To wrap it up, I of course want to share our budget. I did include some optional add-ons, so you could remove these and it would make the price a little bit more friendly. On the low end, we come in at $28,060, and at the high end, closer to $32,000. Those optional add-ons are integrating a community survey and a community workshop into your process if you want to engage external input. Something else that we add on that is optional, of course, and I noted that you had included in your budget for 2025 some communications dollars. I have not worked with a single local government in the last 3 years that hasn't had at least one strategic goal around communications. It's really kind of a daunting task that a lot of organizations are facing because the way we receive information has changed so dramatically in the last 30 years. So something I've seen as a need in communities is not having high quality image assets of your municipal parks, of your municipal facilities, trucks, staff, what have you, community events. So something I'm layering in this year, if communities would like to take advantage of it, is I have partnerships with local photographers. You will include as a part of your contract up to 100 high-quality images, including drone footage. You can help develop that image asset list, and once the product is done and you have the final strategic plan, the municipality will receive a perpetual transfer of that reuse license. So should you hire a communications director in the future or continue to manage that on your own, you have a library of updated professional image assets you can use. I haven't found a single community that's like, we have enough photos, we're good. So I'm hopeful that this can be something that's just a cherry on top, especially as you approach communications in a new way over the next 5 years. Lastly, I feel like I am a missionary for explaining how independent contractor rates work. I didn't understand this myself when I was sitting on your side of the table reviewing RFPs. I interviewed many consultants who are part of larger companies or small companies. You certainly don't have to do this, but if you are curious what goes into an hourly rate, I have a blog post on my website called Understanding Independent Contractor Rates, where I break down what it actually looks like to run your own business and how the dollar amount per hour is a little bit deceptive because it does include our own health insurance, taxes, Medicare, Social Security, health insurance, etc. So if this is something you're curious about and want to understand where that 180 per hour breaks down, we have a little bit of insights from a blog post on there. I'm a little over my 15 minutes, so I will wrap it, and I'm happy to take any questions you may have.
All right, thanks, Allison. Any initial questions from board members?
So Allison, thank you for that presentation, really thorough, thank you. My question is around focus groups, and how do you make sure that the most vulnerable part of the population, their voices are heard in these focus groups?
Yes, thank you so much for asking that, Laureen. My preferred way in the past has been to have it in neutral spaces. So oftentimes government offices are not a space that feels safe or accessible to all populations. So to identify the proper location within the community, maybe it's a Boys and Girls Club, maybe it's a church, find out what that proper space is and work to host there. Also really lean heavily into the service provider community. So those non-governmental organizations that are directly providing services. Sometimes audiences are not going to feel comfortable or safe being reached directly, especially in our current political climate. Some groups are not going to want to be part of an official government interaction. But seeing if those service providers can provide any information to us, being respectful of privacy, of course, or if they have individuals who may be willing to talk one-on-one or in a focus group.
Any other questions? All right.
Thank you
Yes.
so much.
As I pull this up, I have to echo what Allison said because I looked at the agenda, and I said, of course it's Allison. She and I do this together a lot, so it was fun to see her here. And with that, let me just, I've never done this with a Zoom meeting before, so this is a new experience for me. Learn something new all the time, right? Here we go. All right. So, my name is Corey Porras-Plash. I am the CEO and founder of CP2 Consulting. A little bit about my firm. Again, there's me. I am a former 911 dispatcher, so my entire career has been either in local government or serving local government. Some of the other positions I've had, I was the executive director of the Wisconsin City County Management Association. I was a membership director of the Alliance for Innovation, which was just as much fun as it sounds, and that was also serving local government. This is really where I have spent my life, and I love local government. Another thing that I did is I spent 3 years working for a startup that actually interacted with and worked with community engagement. And so that's something that I spend a lot of time doing. But for me, strategic planning really is a passion. I describe myself as a one-time victim of strategic planning. I was the executive director of a chamber of commerce, and we did a strategic plan, and the more they talked, the more I kind of sat down in my seat because they had really lofty goals about all the wonderful things that they wanted to do, and I knew that it was not going to be what was attainable. And one of the big things that's important to me about strategic planning is that we get a strategic plan that fits the community. So that's one of the reasons why I started my own company. I wanted to make sure that strategic planning, when done well, can be such an asset, and strategic planning, when done poorly, can just be really demoralizing to everybody. So with that, what is strategic planning? It's about getting everybody on the bus and headed in the same direction. Who's everybody? Everybody is the community. It's the elected board, it's staff. And community is everybody from residents and businesses to high school students. I love focus groups with high school students. They're fun. And when we're looking at the future, we really want to talk to the people we want to have here in the future. So really getting everybody on the bus, headed in the same direction, that's the other thing. So what's the process? And this is kind of in my, my proposal as well. But this is kind of the thing, we go through, engagement, operating environment, all of this, but sometimes it's really kind of helpful to go through and think about it in a slightly different way. So I hope you'll indulge me for just a second. Let's talk about the process in a slightly different way. Let's think about this in terms of what is it like in a slightly different context. If you've never done strategic planning before, I'm going to give you an example to kind of understand the process, right? So imagine getting together and going, where do we want to be in the next 3 to 5 years, right? What would be important to our family? What kinds of things would we want to do? If we could change things, what kinds of things would we change? That really is what stakeholder engagement is about. And we can do that in a lot of ways. So what I've recommended for Cottage Grove then is that we want to do that with a community survey, because we can hear from a lot of people that way. So when we're talking about trying to get a lot of people involved, that's a way to get to a lot of different people. And we can do a survey in a way where we reach a lot of different people by messaging that well and by really having good outreach, but also by focus groups. What I have found with focus groups, again, is that if we really kind of pick and choose who it is that we're trying to talk to, we can really make sure that we're getting to people and understanding different components of the community. I really appreciated your question about how to understand from different perspectives. We know, and I've actually spoken on this nationally, there are certain groups that we know are less likely to get engaged. So what we want to do is that we want to make sure that we are understanding their perspective, sometimes nonprofit groups or communities of trust. So we may want to go through, we may want to find who are some trusted people in the community. Can we use them to help us? Maybe it's not a large focus group, maybe it's a small focus group, but we want to make sure that we can really understand the community from different perspectives. Again, but we want to ask some important questions. So what's the operating environment? All that is, and again, if we're talking about our family, it's things like job, workload, those things that are outside of our household. organizational profile, those things in our house, right? How much free time do we have? We have home repairs or budgets. We're just kind of looking at things. For local government, we're looking at things like unfunded mandates and stuff like that. And then we're looking inside our house as well. What's our budget like? What's staff retention rates like? Those are the things that we're doing. And then we do all of that, and we take that and we do a SWOT analysis. I like to do a SWOT analysis as part of the retreat process. Everybody has an opportunity to be involved with that, and I actually do it by survey. Why do I do it by survey? Because a lot of times in the SWOT process, it becomes more of a data analysis exercise. It's a really great way to find some common themes easily. So then the leadership retreat, or that family meeting, that's where we go through and we figure out that vision, mission, values, and then those goals. But that really is a chance for everybody to get together and talk about those really important issues. So I'm going to then kind of lead you through this first example of goal 1 is a road trip, because who doesn't like to go on vacation, right? So rather than talking about something specific, I decided to talk about something fun. So we're going to go ahead, we're going to talk about a family vacation to Florida, February of 2026, because when it's cold, who doesn't want to go to Florida, right? All right. So when we talk about those measurable targets, what does this look like? So outcome, all it is what does success look like? So we want to have a relaxing afternoon on the beach. That's what our family wants out of this goal. And again, it's not the whole thing. We're just looking at one little part of it. This is going to be part of a larger plan. Key indicator, what are we measuring? When I see plans fall apart, it's because we aren't measuring things well. So we want to have a target of a fancy drink budget, because who doesn't want to have a drink with a little umbrella in it? Mocktail, cocktail, doesn't make any difference. Everybody likes to have a fun drink on the beach. But the thing then is that we have to have some sort of dollar amount. What that then does for us is we have got a very precise thing now we know that we're heading towards. When I hear people say, we have a strategic plan and it's sat on a shelf, or even worse, I hear the board say, we had a strategic plan and just never did anything, and the staff goes, oh my gosh, what do you mean? It's because we did not have a precise goal that everybody agreed on. We knew exactly where we were going. So now from this, we can go ahead and we can figure out how we're going to get there. Maybe we're going to have a Starbucks reduction plan, right? Instead of going to Starbucks every, once a week, we're going to go a little bit less often. We're going to put it in our vacation plan. We're going to do something, but now we know what it is that we're heading for. So turning this back now to local government, right? When we're thinking about this, leadership retreat consists of small groups of elected officials and staff. Targets are normally loosely defined at that retreat. Also want to talk about a measure gallery. A measure gallery, again, is another way to build buy-in. I'll show you a picture of that in just a second. And then those clear expectations are really important. This is a measure gallery. After we go through and we do those initial measures, I like to bring back staff. Why? Performance measures can be super scary. How, what does this mean? What is this going to do? How is this going to impact us? Measure gallery gives staff a chance to weigh in on it again. And we can have the public come in at that point as well. It's another chance to get more information and to get more buy-in at that point. They can ask questions, they can understand more of what's going on. This is what it looks like, just to kind of give you an idea. I've done in several different places. And then phase 2 is implementation. The leadership from that phase 1 in terms of staff stays on, but then we open it up a little bit more. So I'm sitting here today because of policy manuals. I was a 911 dispatcher. They said, who wants to do a policy manual? And I said, I had no great love of policy manuals, but I did have interest in doing maybe something different in the future. And I thought maybe that would be a way to find out more. A strategic plan can be a great way for us to start tapping our future leadership and getting them more involved. I had no idea when I volunteered to do a policy manual that I was going to learn more about just dispatch and more about the police department as a whole. And once I learned about the police department as a whole, then I started learning about the city. And that's why I'm sitting here today. This can be a great opportunity to bring in more people. You don't have to have a lot of knowledge about particular areas. Actually, sometimes it's better to have a fresh set of eyes on it. We want to take that implementation team from different places. So what are we going to do? We're going to go through, we're going to do detailed action plans. If you're familiar with the project management, RACI, responsible, accountable, consulted, informed, we're going to go ahead, we're going to do project plans that do that. But we're also going to make sure that we are integrating budget, CIP, all of the other plans. Because some of the problems in local government is we have some of these things and they stand alone, and we don't ever bring them together. We want to make sure that we're integrating everything. And then we also want to make sure that we're reporting on them on a regular basis. So, and most of my clients do this quarterly, but they're also reporting on them to the public, to the board. We get into a reporting cadence on how we're doing on progress on our measures. And then you guys aren't done with me yet, because what do? I keep on checking in because all I do is strategic planning. So sometimes there are obstacles, you just don't know what to do. Or you want to celebrate successes. So I come back and I keep on checking in. I come in and I check in quarterly for 3 more sessions, do it on Zoom, but I also keep staff then kind of apprised of what are some of the newest developments in strategic planning. If I have new tools, I pass them along. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. Some of the things about our firm, we specialize in strategic planning. This is all that we do. So 40+ hours a week, I talk about strategic planning. This is what we specialize in. We only work with local governments and nonprofits. I do have a strategic planning certification, so I do understand private sector. I spend as little time talking about it as I can, but there is some things that's helpful to kind of know. And then we work extensively in Wisconsin. So that's a list of some of the clients that we're working with. We're finishing up some stuff. We've also got some active things that are going on right now. And with that, any questions?
Any questions from board members for Corey? All right.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you again. All right, then with that, we'll move to reports from village boards, commissions, and committees. Starting off with Utility Commission, Chris.
We met way back on Wednesday, January 8th. We approved the minutes from the 2 previous, the October and the December meetings, approved the vouchers. We had a discuss and consider about water tower lease agreement with Verizon, which was also a closed session item. New business was a presentation from Hamburg regarding Coyle Highland Utilities. There was also a couple people here to talk about a project that they were interested in doing in sort of the lot that's sort of across the little pond from Foundations, about a brew pub there. Hamburg said that they, I'm trying to read my own writing, sorry, need help funding for the interceptor, and they were asking for help from the village. It's financially impossible for them to build a neighborhood right now, and one of the two, either I think it was Near and Far Brewing, would like to proceed in 2025 for construction. And then we had a couple of closed session items, and then we adjourned. Our next meeting is next Wednesday.
Any questions for Chris? All right, you're still up. Public Works.
Public Works met on the same day, half an hour later, 5:30. We approved the minutes. Unfinished business, we discussed membership in the Wisconsin Bike Fed. We were members in 2022 and 23, but not 2024. We had some discussion about which level we would be comfortable participating in the Bike Fed in, and we went with the lowest level just to sort of see what that gets us, and so we can see how we might want to proceed in the future. That was a $250 level. We discussed sustainability goals. Since some measures are not attainable in the near future, like changing to vehicles, again, trying to read my handwriting. So they're focusing on net footprint with like facilities and being as carbon neutral as we can, and trying to get a more realistic time frame for the sustainability goals. Then we discussed the e-waste event in April. Previously, we're going to do a dumpster at a location. that appears that that's not feasible anymore. I have written down here, April 26th at the Bonnie Road shop, with MSB as a backup. It'll be a one-day, am I reading this right? One-day event, oh yeah, one-day event, from 8 to 12 or 1, with 1 or 2 staff people there, and people can come to drop off stuff in specific boxes. Then new business, we discussed a request to install benches at a stormwater pond. We were generally okay with it. We just wanted to make sure that village staff was the ones that installed it, so we had we could decide where to put it and how to secure it so it didn't get moved by anybody. Engineers report that we have a late February bid timeline for streets projects. Directors report. Operations are ongoing for tree trimming, it looks like I wrote. And then for future agenda items, we're going to talk about the review of solar panels and streets and the multi-use path. And we will again meet next week.
And then with this, we have the discuss and consider recommendation.
Yes.
Go ahead.
We just, I don't know if Kyla wants to talk more about it. She looks like she's raring to go. I'll just turn it over to you.
No, so as part of the benches memo that was included in the Public Works packet back in January, it was brought to trustee Calum Nelson about a bench at the stormwater pond, as there's a lot of people that use that pond for fishing as well as ice skating. One thing that was talked about at the staff level in Public Works is, again, where to place it. There's no concrete pad that is currently anticipated to go with this bench. How is it secured? Maintenance around it. And so out of Public Works, they recommended that if the resident would like to donate the bench, that they would like to donate the bench, and then it would come back to staff to kind of discuss internally the best placement for that bench. So just looking for approval or any discussion and direction from the board at this time.
Any questions?
Kyla, I just have a quick question. In the memo, it says the village staff would not recommend placing the bench at the stormwater pond.
I wouldn't recommend placing it at the location. They're looking at the stormwater pond next to the post office,
Yeah.
and right now we don't mow or maintain that area, so I wouldn't recommend putting it at that location. If you guys are interested in acquiring the bench from the resident, I would go back and could talk with Sean and other staff members as a better location for a bench at this time.
Which would be a different pond.
Potentially.
Okay.
So I thought it was a pond to the south. It's the pond to the north of Cottage Grove Road, BB? The one, okay.
That was what my understanding was when it says pond by post office.
Okay, there's one right across the street, sort of.
Yes, there is.
So
Yeah.
who owns that land?
Right now, there's a stormwater pond that we have an easement. It's a stormwater drainage easement. And then it's a private owner that can develop that land at this
'Cause
time.
the pond to the north next to the post office is privately owned land.
It's privately owned land, but we have a storm drainage easement on it for our pond.
Okay. And so the recommendation would be to put the bench on that easement?
Not at that pond, no.
Okay.
That's the recommendation, unless I misunderstood the pond that he was talking about. I took it as the pond right next to the post office.
Yeah, I was gonna ask, can you show us on a map what pond we're talking about, but it sounds like none of us know.
Yeah, even me. I assumed it was the one across the street from the post office. I didn't know that there was one behind.
Yeah, there's two.
Yeah.
One sec, I'm pulling it up.
But I'll be honest with you, I've never really seen anybody fish on the one to the north next to the post office. I've seen them fish to the south and ice skate, yeah.
That was my assumption.
Yeah.
Well, I deeply apologize. I can take that back. There is no path that leads there right now. So there is a pond here to the north that is next to the post office. And there is a pond to the south. And so the pond to the north, we own a stormwater easement, a drainage easement along this pond and for this property. But this is owned by a private parcel.
Yep.
And then, yes, this is our stormwater detention pond.
And I've seen people fish in both, believe it or not, so.
In both,
Yeah, and I skate on the one next to Foundation.
yeah. I've seen quite a bit of that.
Seems like we need to table this till we know what pond we're talking about. And then, I'd love for the staff to come back with a recommendation.
I agree, it's a little too
Once-
mushy.
Yeah, once we know which pond.
Absolutely. Sounds good.
If I could just make one comment, I guess, just about ponds in general, just, because one thing to keep in mind, I guess, is just the village's immunity from liability. So generally, like discretionary decisions or legislative decisions, the village is going to be immune. There's also recreational immunity. So I know in the past, at the staff level, we've had conversations about ponds and what sort of amenities should or shouldn't be there. And it's a stormwater pond, so like that's its primary purpose. So if recreational activities are going to be permitted there, we may want to look at how we can best protect the village, because if we can create another level of like recreational immunity, that's just going to put the village in a better position. Because if something does happen at that pond, we just want to be sure that we've done everything we can to minimize the village's risk.
Rick, is this like signage around the pond or something like that? This is clarifying its usage, or what are you kind of talking about?
It depends on which direction you want to go. If you want this to be a stormwater pond and like a recreational area, then it would make sense to take steps that indicate it's meant for recreational uses, because that just adds another layer of immunities. Like on top of the general immunity the village has, you're also adding the recreational immunity for recreational spaces. If the decision is, no, we don't want this pond used for recreational immunity, then signage would be appropriate to say like, no fishing, no ice skating. But again, there's other considerations that go into that, right? Because it is a community use.
No fun.
But it is a serious thing we have to consider. There have been situations where,
Correct.
kids lost their lives on a pond that was not meant for recreational use and wasn't frozen enough. And so, the line between not preventing recreation from happening and making sure people are safe and that we're protected is like, we have to find the medium and all of that.
Right. So I think it's just a question of which direction the village board wants to go, and then taking the steps necessary to implement that and make sure that we're doing all that we can to prevent future risks.
So is this a recommendation then also then to send it back to Public Works so that they can have that kind of conversation, and then maybe even to Parks if it goes the one way?
That would certainly be something the board could do. It would make sense to, I guess, get feedback on what direction the village wants to go.
Yeah. Okay.
So would we need to make a motion then to send it back to Parks and Public Works for further comment?
Yeah, I think that'd be good just to get the direction.
Okay, I would make that motion then, to send it back to Public Works and Parks for feedback.
Okay. All right, thank you, Chris. Motion and second then to send it back.
Do you want me to find out the preferred location? Or is this kind of more of a general discussion too?
But, yeah, I think since we do have two
I
ponds.
think it's both, but I think the notion of putting a bench and setting it up, there's definitely some endorsement of this pond being, approved for recreational use. So I think we got to be really careful. So I think we need Public Works to take a look at it before we start getting a little too far down the path of where the bench is going to go and where do we want it. Because this is more of a general question, I think.
All right. We have a motion and second then. Any other discussion? Having heard none, all those in favor? Aye. Anybody opposed? Anybody abstain? Motion carries. All right. Next then we had Plan Commission. I'll take a swing at this and then see if anybody else who is there will also weigh in. We met on the same night as Utilities and Public Works. full house in the building here. So that was on January 8th. We had initial discussion about for staff to research the potential of zoning amendment to permit beekeeping in a single-family residence. This was brought to us by a resident who would wish to do this. So staff is actually doing that. We'll bring that back to the Planning Commission for further discussion. Next, then, we had a presentation concept plan for Near and Far Brewing Company for a potential multi-tenant building on lot number 45, right next to the pond across from Foundation Dance we were just talking about. And then this was for discussion only. They were just looking for the Plan Commission's thoughts on this. The commission provided positive feedback. This ties back into the discussion that Chris highlighted earlier about utilities and the force main and such in that area. So that's where that's at. So there's a lot of moving parts with this, but Near and Far Brewing will come back at some point when they have further plans. And I think further discussions, both utility as well as Plan Commission. So next we had a discuss comparison of public hearing notice requirements for Dane County communities. This was in regards to the 400 feet that we use currently, which is double what Aaron confirmed that most communities have, but there was, again, citizens raising this question in regards to that. Just again, that was a discussion. There's more work to be looked at with that. And then we had a discuss and consider of ordinance regarding the zoning of tobacco and vape shops, fences, and chickens. They're all looped into the same ordinance. And this is mainly around the tobacco and vape shops. The laws have changed a bit, so our ordinance needs to keep up with that, and that actually is for consideration for this board tonight. And then had a discussion about the zoning ordinance related to library parking requirements, and that's yet still, there's no consideration yet tonight for us. So, any questions, anything to add? Aaron, I don't know if you're still, Aaron, you're on.
Yeah, Don, I'm here. I think that covered everything. There was a discuss and consider item for the ordinance, if you want to move on to that.
Can I just say one thing quick?
Yeah.
I just had a comment on the discussion around the library parking requirements. There seemed to be kind of a lack of understanding how minimum parking requirements function, because they seem to be, because they're like right now, the ordinance that's proposed is for 24 spots, would equal 24 spots. And it seemed like some of the members were kind of acting like that was the maximum that was able to be put there. So I just wanted to sort of put out there because I know it's probably going to come back to the Planning Commission, but a minimum parking requirement of 24 doesn't preclude, I know they said they were comfortable with 40. A minimum of 24 doesn't preclude having 40 spots on that site. So I just wanted to mention that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Any other comments in regards to the Plan Commission? Otherwise, then we have the discuss and consider about the vape shops and the chickens and the fences.
So you
and
were
tobacco.
gonna write a new ordinance for the beekeeping? Is that what came out of the discussion?
Further research into that and consideration of that is what is coming for that.
Because I think that, maybe I'm wrong, but I've seen it where beekeeping and chickens are sometimes put in the same ordinance.
I would.
There's a couple. I have a random, I know a lot about chickens. I know a lot of chicken ordinances.
Yeah, right now the village's zoning ordinance, it prohibits beekeeping. So to allow it, there would need to be an ordinance change to specifically say this is a permitted accessory use for single-family residential. So that's what the Plan Commission will be evaluating.
Yeah, and it'll come back here too. And the other one is related to the changes in vape shops in particular and tobacco. And we want to tighten that up and had a lot of discussion about that, and that's what's for consideration. I don't know, Frick, you want to add anything else to that?
I don't think I have anything else to add at this point.
I'll make a motion to approve ordinance 1-2025, amending the zoning ordinance related to tobacco and vape shops, fences, and keeping of chickens.
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion second. Any other discussion?
I just have a quick question. Was there a request that we be able to allow chickens at a group daycare center, or,
Yes.
okay,
Yes.
thanks.
There was a request to have chickens at a group daycare
Yes.
center? Any safety issues with that?
No.
None.
This apparently is the thing.
It's a thing.
It is a thing. Several in Madison have chickens with little kiddos.
You know, it talks about keeping chickens, it doesn't say how many you can have. Typically, I've seen ordinances like this in other areas where there's limits based on available space, et cetera. It just seems too open-ended to me, say, oh, you can just have chickens. You can have 100, 1,000, 10,000 chickens, there's no limits. To me, it doesn't seem robust enough to approve.
So that's just not part of what we're changing. We're just adding the group daycare language to what we already have. Because that part of the ordinance wasn't changing, we didn't put it in here, but there's a limit of 6. There are limits on the size of the coop and the space available. We're just not changing any of that. We're making it the same for the residential
Okay.
properties that we have now that we would also have for the daycares.
It's just not in the packet, okay.
Yeah.
It's not part of what's being amended, I guess.
Yeah, there's basically just a cross-reference to the existing requirements in the single-family residential.
So no chicken farms at daycares.
No roosters
Yes.
either.
Right.
So I guess the question on the vape shops, et cetera, is that something, we don't have any vape shops in Cottage Grove right now. Is that something that, as a village, we have to allow that? And THC businesses?
It's been a while since I looked at the ordinance, but basically, under the current uses permitted in like the business or commercial district, a vape shop would satisfy like the business or like the retail sales. So by creating this special definition, we're limiting the use, basically. So right now, if somebody wanted to open a vape shop, the current zoning would allow them to do so in a commercial district or business district. I forgot the exact designation.
Yeah, it's just tightening things up because of the state law changes.
You can look up a lot of information about some of our neighboring communities and some of the challenges they've had because they didn't have ordinances like this in place before vape shops came to the community. So that's one thing we talked about in Plan Commission.
So we're allowing it in planned office, planned business, and planned industrial.
But it has to be, it cannot be located within 1,000 feet of an
Understood.
elementary or secondary school, library, park, playground. So there are additional, and
Okay.
they can't be within 500 feet of each other. So there are additional
Limitations.
restrictions.
Yep, okay, got it, thank you.
Any other discussion? All right, we have a motion and second, I believe, in this. So all those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Anybody abstain?
I'm gonna abstain.
Okay. Motion carries. Next, then, if there's nothing else on plan, we'll move to the library board. Cindy?
Yep, so the library board met on Wednesday, January 15th at 6 o'clock. We had discussed, Cameron came and gave kind of a capital campaign overview, just to kind of show us all about the logistics and the setup and being ready to take contingent pledges on a successful referendum. Tracy also gave an update on some of our marketing, social media engagement strategies moving forward for 2025 to hit some of our strategic plan goals. She gave an update on programming and the programming tracker. There's cards in front of everybody. It's also posted online. The events, both for youth and then also for families and adults, February through May. We approved our bills list, and that was pretty much it. Our next meeting is Wednesday, February 19th at 6 o'clock.
All right, thanks, Cindy. Next, then, we have Deer Grove EMS, and that's Cindy or Pete.
Oh, it doesn't matter.
And we have Chief here. We have Chief here as well.
Okay, I'll start. Deer Grove EMS Commission met in Cottage Grove on Thursday, January 16th at 6:30. We approved minutes financial reports, bills, and budgeted approved expenses, write-offs, and aging of accounts. Chief gave his staff reports. We approved or discussed an increase in temporary credit card limits. And then we discussed, considered, and approved the resolution for the ambulance capital purchase transfer fund, which is also on our agenda for tonight. We had a closed session performance review, reconvened, and adjourned. I'll let you discuss staff report highlights and the capital transfer if you'd like.
Sure. I think the important piece from the staff report was that our call volume was up about 6% for the year, and we're trending that percentage or higher for our limited part of the year thus far. We had some slower months through the middle part of the year last year, but I'd anticipate the 135 to 150 calls being our normal going forward, which is what we achieved this past January. Hiring, I think, is something that everyone always has questions about. We had not only the 2 positions that were created through the approval of the 2025 budget that we hired for those, but we also had 2 staff members that resigned to move on to other departments. One is a kind of a lateral transfer because of a pay-related thing with a neighboring department, and another to be promoted. So we lost one of our long tenured paramedics, Devin Anders, to Fitrona EMS to be a deputy chief within their organization. So we also hired for those 2 positions. We had eyes on the 2 additional openings in the process. So we kind of had an inkling that we were going to need to hire 2 or 4 instead of 2. So we were able to keep the group engaged in that. One of the full-timers started late January, 2 started today, and another will start in 2 weeks. So because of having such a high number of new staff members as opposed to the process that we used before that was maybe a little bit more aggressive for the staff, where they got to the staff or got onto the ambulance and then worked a 24-hour shift and attempted to orient them while in a 24-hour shift, we changed a little bit and made the orientation be 12-hour days for their first week, so they're able to orient to our policies, procedures, and culture and staff and all those things during daytime hours, rather than try to keep everybody up at 2 in the morning and function appropriately. So that's kind of a good overview of the end of the year. As far as the resolution that you've been presented to approve today, not only was it approved at the EMS commission level, it's been approved by the other 2 municipal partners. What this resolution says is that we were allocated $130,000 for the capital purchase last year. We didn't use all of it because we knew we weren't going to use all of it. The majority that we spent was on the chassis and the power cot and power load system. So that left just over $17,000 remaining. If we didn't do anything with it, it would transfer into fund balance. My experience with this 3 years ago when we purchased another ambulance is that when we have our audit, that will be on Thursday, they will request this piece of information to say that not only did the funds transfer into the fund balance, but we're going to make it so that it's a designated portion of the fund balance so that we can't spend it on anything else until we get the completed ambulance back, which should be about April. So that's an overview of the resolution, and if anyone had any questions about either operations or the resolution, I'd be happy to answer.
Any questions for Chief?
If you would extend our welcome to your new staff, we appreciate that they're ready to serve the community and help those residents in their time of need. So thank you for bringing them onto the team.
For sure, I'll let them know when I see them tomorrow.
I'll make a motion that we approve the resolution 2025-01-0116 about the ambulance capital purchase fund transfer as presented.
I'll second that.
All right, we have a motion second then. Any other discussion? All right, having heard none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Any abstain? Motion carries. Do you want to run away with this right now?
Thought I lost it from the last time it got signed. So
Wear your red shoes today.
what's that?
Wear your red shoes today.
Oh, they don't like go with the rest of the minute.
So over the weekend, the association had their annual event, and Chief was wearing these rather dapper red shoes, so that's why I said that. So,
Yeah, the concept for our party was wicked, and I thought I'd wear ruby red slippers, but they don't really make 12 extra wide ruby red slippers, so I had to go with some dudes.
a lot of very nice recognition, though. Thanks, Chief, for the staff.
Yeah, to kind of pigeonhole on that, I'll send an email to all the commission members of what the awards were, and then you can forward it on to the boards so that we had life-saving awards and cardiac arrest save awards and some other more fun awards related to how quickly someone responds to calls, things related to important parts of the operation. So I'll forward out the PowerPoint to the commission, and then they can distribute to the rest of the board.
Thanks, Chief. All right. Next, then, we have Peer Court Steering Committee. Cindy.
Yep. Peer Court Steering Committee met for perhaps the last time on January 21st at 5 p.m. We got an update from Briar Patch. The year-end totals for the village in 2024 were 21 cases. There's currently 9 pending cases. Of the cases in 2024, 10 were successfully resolved, 2 were unsuccessful, and then the 9 that carried over. Looking forward to 2025, Briar Patch is eager to strengthen partnerships with high schools, expand victim advocacy and trauma-informed responses, and increase participation and training for their restorative justice circles. We then discussed the reorganization of peer steering and really how we are planning to move into a restorative justice model to be aligned a little bit better with the municipalities surrounding us. We reviewed 3 key documents. So we had an updated MOU, a draft letter template with a couple of edits maybe for minors receiving restorative justice citations, and then a restorative justice citation template. And I think we discussed all of those, gave our feedback and edits, and then it was going to go to the Law Enforcement Committee from there, which is a little further down on the agenda. So if the village board decides to transition to a restorative justice pathway, our committee, which is already ad hoc, would no longer need to meet. The end.
All right. Next, then, we have Parks, Rec, and Forestry. Heidi?
Yep, thank you. We met on Thursday, January 23rd, and we had a relatively short agenda. We talked about the Houston Park update. If you remember, we're taking 2 different years of planned budget to make the improvements to Houston Park. This year, the planned updates, I believe it's out to bid now, and we're moving the playground kind of up to higher ground, so it's out of kind of a low area that collects a lot of water. We'll have ADA accessibility to the ball field, and then there's an alternate for the basketball court, which would be kind of up closer to Trillium Trail, and that works well because it's easily monitored from, when police department kind of does their rounds instead of being tucked back away from the road. There's also a sidewalk that had been planned in the master plan for the park, but that part would come later. If there's ever any utility improvements along there, then the sidewalk would run over that. We also got an update on the Bark Park. The Bark Park is open, and we had a fantastic Eagle Scout project that built a couple kind of ramps to make some improvements in the park. I think things are going pretty smoothly so far. And Sean went through his report. The community activity guide is coming up later this month. I don't know if you have anything to add from your report, Sean?
You got it.
Okay. Otherwise, we'll be talking about the Shady Grove Park at future agenda items. Any questions?
Just a comment, bring your hiking boots for the large dog area. It's a pretty steep climb, but the dogs love it.
Oh, I would add one other quick, thanks to staff for always accommodating nice weather stretches, because I think the pickleball and tennis courts were open briefly. Well, we had a little taste of spring, so thank you.
All right, thanks Heidi. Then next we had NADVIG landfill monitoring.
All right, we met on January 27th and approved the bills. There was a little bit of over budget just because there's some additional testing and staff time that hadn't been planned for. There's a small sinkhole in the landfill, not causing any particular issues right now, but it's there. And they're monitoring it, and that was it.
All right. Thanks, Sarah. Then we can move right to the fire district then.
Okay, that's me also. All right, well, we also met right after NATVIG on the 27th. We went over the chief's report and the annual report, which are both in the agenda. We did discuss the furnace repair at Emergency Services Building, and in the end, the furnace started working again. So we decided we didn't need to do the repairs right now. And then we did talk about the 5-year plan for the ESB repair fund again. And I think ultimately what we landed on is it sounds like EMS is putting together a 5-year plan, and the thinking is that fire could do something similar. Given that they do share that building space, and that could inform the ESB fund and the amounts that each community contributes. But John and Lorene, did I capture that correctly?
Yes.
All right, and then regarding the lighting repairs, we did approve the lighting repairs to be funded out of the ESB fund as they were previously approved last year. That was the meeting. Unless John or Lorene want to add something.
Nope, captured it. All right. Next, then we have Law Enforcement Committee. So as Cindy alluded to, we did have a discussion about restorative justice. Jay Kiefer from Briar Patch was at the meeting. The committee recommended consideration for this board for the MOU, which is in front of us, for this board to look at. Chief walked through kind of the process as well as Jay. It's more in line with other communities. It gets the juveniles in faster and moving through rather than long waiting periods, which is one of the reasons why, to do this and ensure that they do get a chance to get restorative justice fairly quickly. Chief walked through kind of the plan for updating the strategic plan for the PD and the work group assembly, which is starting to happen. Then there was a demonstration of potential new utilization for analytics that Chief provided for RMS system. More to come on that. And then Chief, because we didn't meet in December, went through the November numbers and December numbers as far as activity. Nothing to note there of interest or concern, just the normal numbers. The activities continue to go up as we grow as a community. And that was pretty much it. Chief, anything I missed?
You covered it, sir.
All right. So again, any questions about the MOU for Briar Patch?
I'll make a motion that we approve the memorandum of understanding with Briar Patch Youth Services, Inc. as presented.
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion and second then. Any other discussion? Having heard none, all those in favor? Aye. Anybody opposed? Any abstain? Motion carries. Next, then, we have reports from village officers. Rick, what do you have for us? Got some attachments. You got
Yeah.
your
So I'm gonna
name and print.
trying to get everything here. So I just wanted to talk about, there was some requests about open meetings issues in like, social media. So I wanted to just give a brief presentation on both of those topics and then answer any questions that anybody has. Just especially given elections coming up, we want to make sure that we're doing everything we can to protect village officials and the village itself. So first, just about open meetings. So this is very brief outline, like the Wisconsin Department of Justice has like an 80-page manual on this. So like trying to synthesize this down is very difficult, but basically meetings of governmental bodies, they need to be preceded by notice. So generally 24 hours notice. So that any meeting of a governmental body, so first like a governmental body is the village board, it's a committee, it's a subcommittee, whether it's created by ordinance, by order of the board, or like a motion of the board. So like if you were to create a subcommittee, like the Centennial, right? So you created a subcommittee that's created by order of the board. So basically any committee, village board falls under the definition of a governmental body, and therefore the public meetings law would apply to them for any meetings that they hold. So a meeting is basically if you have a majority of the governmental body there and they're meeting for an official public purpose or business, then that's presumed to be a meeting of the governmental body. So I guess the presumption is if you have a majority of people there, there's a presumption that it's a meeting for governmental business. So if that's the case, you have to have a 24-hour notice of what the meeting is about, agenda topics, things like that. So what kind of gets into tricky situations is, so it's not only if it's a majority, it's also if it's enough to affect the decision. So for instance, budget amendments, those require a 2/3 vote of the village board. So if you were to get together, if you were, like say one trustee were to talk to two other trustees about a budget amendment, you could theoretically say that like they have the ability to affect the decision of the board. So even that could constitute a meeting under the open meeting law if you're talking about a 2/3 vote. So it's just important to keep in mind like what's the threshold for the approval that we're talking about or the vote that we're talking about. Another thing that trips people up is the walking quorum. So if there's nothing wrong with one trustee talking to another, like just having that face-to-face conversation. What gets people into trouble is if you have a conversation with another trustee, then you have another conversation with a different trustee, and you start talking to all these different trustees to try to figure out what the consensus of the body might be. So basically, never talk to more than a majority of the board because any discussion, any decisions, those have to be made in an open meeting that's open to the public. Some other things just to note here too with like written correspondence or email. What makes this complicated is the open meetings law was written in like the 1970s or 80s. So it preceded email where it's so much easier to correspond with other people now. So if you're sending out emails that are going to all the board members, the basic recommendation is don't do that, but otherwise have it be BCC'd so there's no way to reply all. The Attorney General has given the opinion that if it's a one-way flow of information, that's likely okay under the open meetings law. But if people are replying all, then that's gonna get into a really sticky situation. So one-way flow of information is likely okay under the DOJ opinion. Social media as well. Again, this is something where we're dealing with an old law with new standards, or new technology. So if you're commenting on a post and there are other trustees commenting on a post, like that creates a gray area about, is this a meeting? Like, is there communication going on between the trustees? So it's just very important to watch what your communications are on social media. And so you're not interacting with like other trustees, whether it's comments or posts and things like that. And we'll talk a little bit more about social media. Social gatherings or chance gatherings, those are okay So like I said, there's a presumption that if you've got a majority, that it's a meeting of the governmental body. But if, like, let's say all of you show up at Fireman's Festival in the summer, there's no, like, that's sort of a chance gathering. Like, it's a festival, presumably many people will be there. That's okay. You run into, you know, a few other trustees at the grocery store, that's fine. That's just a chance gathering. It's more or less the intent to have a business discussion or to be talking about items that are under the jurisdiction of the board. And now my computer's restarting. So that's generally my elevator pitch for the open meetings law. Happy to answer any questions.
If any trustees violate any of these things, who has oversight? Like,
So it generally would fall on the district attorney or the attorney general. They generally prosecute those things. So there could be like a referral to the Dane County DA's office. It's not like there's jail time assigned to it, but it's a fine or a forfeiture if there's a violation. And it could invalidate any action that the board did take. So plus you just don't want to be involved in something like that. I've dealt with those before, and it's just very nerve-wracking for everybody involved.
So I have a question on the walking quorum and the email correspondence. Is the legislature exempt from that?
They might be. They like to do that, so.
Okay. Because I've had a couple occasions where before a committee meeting, they come in and ask how we think our boss will be voting, and I've always thought that maybe that might be an issue, but nobody's ever said anything.
Right, because they've got like caucus meetings, right?
Yeah.
So it's like if you're in the majority, and so I'm not entirely sure how the legislature works, but like at the local government, definitely like if you're having those conversations, you have to be careful about the numbers that you're talking to.
Thanks for presenting on this, Rick, because I requested a presentation after reading your article in the municipality.
Yeah.
And I guess I'd be interested in some more information about Facebook, because I think a lot of people in the community feel that they can turn to Facebook to get that community dialogue, and it may come off that we're not being very transparent or open because we're not communicating our thoughts on Facebook. And so interjecting, I mean, when you get interjecting on a comment or a thread, it's, you can pretty soon have multiple people commenting on that. And, maybe this is just underscoring the fact that we can't have a quorum on social media and have that kind of correspondence. Is there, kind of these one-way posts where you could post something but not have comments, and then you have like liking things. That's also like an endorsement of something. I guess that there's so many like layers.
It's really tricky. Like if 4 trustees like something, right? Like, is that an open meetings violation? I would like to think no, but it's sort of unexplored territory right now, just because no Wisconsin court has looked at it. I think it's a lot more clear if you've got like interactions in comments, because that's more like direct communication, like especially if you're replying to somebody else's comment or you get into a conversation that way. Like if there's back and forth, that's really, I think, what the DOJ is looking at, is to be like, if you like something, yeah, that's a one-way sort of communication, but once you sort of have that back and forth, I think that's where you really start to get cross the line. And I can talk too about like the social media with that article, because that was a case that was decided, it might have been just like a year ago. But so with social media, where officials can sometimes get into trouble is if they're like blocking people or deleting comments. And if it's like an official government account, there are very like, either just disable comments, or you have to have very like solid policies in place about when you'll be deleting comments. When you're talking about public officials like yourselves, then it gets into be a little bit more of a tricky situation. So like this court case that the article which is in the packet. It was the city manager that had his Facebook profile. In his Facebook profile said he was like the city manager, and he was providing city updates on everything from his personal profile. And he had some comments that he didn't like and just started deleting them or blocking users. And one of those users sued, saying it was a violation of their First Amendment rights. So what the court has said is created this two-part test, right? So does the official have the authority to speak on behalf of the governmental body? So it gets a little bit, the line gets blurred when you're talking about employees. So I would say arguably like the village administrator clearly has some right to speak on behalf of the village. You as public officials or elected officials have some rights to speak on the behalf of the village. You know, the scope of that authority isn't like defined by ordinance or custom or policy at this point. But I would say presumably you're all authorized to speak on behalf of the village in some capacity. So when you have your personal like social media pages, then there are lines to be drawn. So one recommendation would just be to put a disclaimer saying like, this is my personal page, like these opinions are my own, I'm not speaking on behalf of the village. That creates a rebuttable presumption that you're not speaking in your official capacity. So like this court case used the example of like a school board president talking during a public meeting of the school board versus like at a backyard barbecue. One is a private capacity, clearly not, you know, using their government authority to speak on behalf of the entity. But the more you post that is related to your role as a public official, the harder that line gets to draw. So putting that disclaimer in there would certainly help if you're doing a lot of posting from social media. Otherwise, if you are, like, even let's say like your personal profile were to be viewed as a public profile, then just don't delete comments, don't block people. That's sort of the upside of it. Otherwise, people could have a First Amendment claim that you've denied them their right to free speech. So again, social media is it continues to be a challenging area for public officials to navigate.
So I get where that affects us, because we've been elected, right? We're elected officials. But what about people who are on like boards and stuff? Like if there's a question asked about a street project or something, and some people from Public Works that are on the Public Works committee respond to it, would that violate it too?
If we had so one thing we could do is like create a policy that says these people have the right to speak on behalf of the village. Like nobody else has that authority. So in your example, potentially like somebody that's appointed to that board, and if it's on a public works project and they're using their personal profile for posting about, you know, village business related to like street projects and things like that, potentially a court could view them as this is a person that's authorized to speak on this particular subject by the village. They're using their social media profile for that purpose. Therefore, if they're like blocking people, that could potentially be a First Amendment violation.
So, and if we had like 4 members of the Public Works Board comment on that back and forth, could that be a walking quorum issue too?
Correct.
Oh, okay.
I'm just full of fun tonight.
Well, social media has incredible power to
Right.
connect people, but it's also, you know, we have to follow the law of open meetings. So it's, making sure that we know how to appropriately use it, I think is important.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions for Rick? You tired of talking?
Not yet.
Okay. All right. Thanks again, Rick, for putting that together. 80 pages down to 3 is impressive. Then next we have communication miscellaneous business. First up is consideration of the vouchers. I had a couple questions on it, but I'll see if anybody else has questions. All right. Nichols Electric on the first attachment, parking lot light repair. What happened to the parking lot lights did they get run into, or just curious?
That was for, you're racking my brain and I didn't pull it up, so. We had one repair on the street light here at, that was hit, that was paid by insurance, and then there was another one that the light bulb was out, and something else was wrong with the communications within the light bulb that staff couldn't fix, that we had Nichols, address for us.
Okay.
And then we changed the light bulb to be LED so it would last longer.
All right, thank you for that. And then the PD overhead door, we run into it or just hiccuped? Chief probably knows this one.
No, it was not run into. Actually, the opener stopped functioning properly and had to be replaced. I believe they replaced it.
Yeah, there was a spring that broke, and so the spring stopped the door from moving, so the entire spring was replaced.
All right. Thank you. Any other questions or comments in regards to vouchers?
I'll make the motion to approve the vouchers as presented.
Second.
We have a motion second then. Any other discussion? Having heard none, all those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Anybody abstain? Motion carries. Correspondence, anybody have anything? I don't, but
We had the correspondence from the Parkinson's run about the special events, and we hadn't finalized anything yet on the special events permit, is that right?
So that ordinance was passed, but the, that entity wouldn't qualify for any sort of exemption under the ordinance changes.
Thank you.
thanks, Heidi.
So did somebody respond to her?
Yes, Sarah, we have been in contact with her. We're still working through the packet, so that will be forthcoming at a future meeting.
Thanks, Lisa.
Thank you, Lisa. Next then, upcoming community events. Anybody have anything they want to shout out about? All right. Then future agenda items. Matt, anything you want to highlight? Nothing? Okay. All right. Then we can start the process of going into closed session. And so I'll get us running through these and then look for seconds for each of these. So the village board would like to go into closed session regarding the possible termination of a developer's agreement with Supreme Cottage Grove LLC. The village Cottage Grove board will enter a closed session pursuant on Wisconsin State Statute 19.85, parentheses 1, parentheses E, deliberating and negotiating the purchasing of public properties, the investing of public funds, the conducting of other specified public business wherever competitive bargaining reasons require a closed session. Is there a second?
Second by Murphy.
All right, thank you, Heidi. And Lisa, can you do the roll call from?
Sure. Cal Nelson,
Aye.
Gage,
Aye.
Dahl,
Aye.
Murphy,
Aye.
Stoa,
Yes.
Valencia,
Aye.
and Williams.
Aye. All right, we'll keep moving through these. We got another couple yet. Next, the village board would like to go into closed session regarding the extending of a lease agreement for the property located at 612 North Main Street, TID number 9. The Village of Cottage Grove Board will enter a closed session pursuant to Wisconsin State Statute 19.85, parentheses 1, parentheses E, deliberating and negotiating the purchasing of public properties, the investing of public funds, or the conducting of otherwise specified public business wherever competitive bargaining reasons require a closed session. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Cindy. Then we'll do another roll call.
All right. Williams,
Aye.
Valencia,
Aye.
Stoa,
Yes.
Murphy,
Aye.
Dahl,
Aye.
Gage,
Aye.
and Cal Nelson.
Aye.
All right, next, the village board would like to go in another closed session regarding the contract terms for potential strategic planning consulting services. The Village of Cottage Grove Board will enter into a closed session pursuant to Wisconsin State Statute 19.85, parentheses 1, parentheses E, deliberating and negotiating the purchase of public properties, investing in public funds, or conducting other specified public business whenever competitive or bargaining reasons require a closed session. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Sarah. That's it, then we'll do another roll call.
All right, Cal Nelson. Aye. Gage.
Aye.
Dole.
Aye.
Murphy.
Aye.
Stoa.
Yes.
Valencia.
Aye.
And Williams.
Aye. All right. Inga, we're not recording anymore, right? Just checking to make sure we're not recording, that's all, since it's a closed session.